Hello there, my name's Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Now, recently, for a set of uninteresting reasons, I had to buy a new laptop. And I didn't have too much money. I certainly never €1,000. I had much less than that. And I wanted to buy the cheapest laptop that I could find, but it did have to meet a few criteria. And I'll talk more about those criteria in a minute. I ended up buying the MSI Thin GF63 with a 12th generation Intel processor inside of it. And since I bought it with my own money and I've been using it as my daily driver for the last couple of weeks, in fact this video was edited on it, I thought I'd give you a full review. So if you want to find out about the cheapest gaming laptop that I could find, please let me explain. Okay, so the criteria that I had was first that the CPU needed to be faster than my current desktop. Now I have a Ryzen 5 1600 in there, so it's a fairly old processor. Okay, so I needed something that was faster in this laptop. It needed at least 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I wanted something with an RTX graphics card in it. So let's run through the specs to see how this particular model matches up with my criteria. So this laptop does come in a variety of different configurations. The one I've got has got an i5 12th generation, so that's the 12450H processor inside of it, and it's also got the GeForce RTX 2050 GPU with 4 gigabytes of GDR6 RAM. Now there are also 3050 models, there are also models with an i7 processor. You can mix and match in this particular range. That's the one I got, so it's the i5 with the 2050. It's also got 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now there are 2 slots on the motherboard and both slots are used. You can do a RAM upgrade if you can open up the laptop up to 64 gigabytes. There's 512 gigabytes of SSD storage. There's a 15.6 full HD, that's 1920 by 1080, 144 Hz IPS display. There's a 720p webcam, a gigabit LAN, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.4, and then you've got one Type-C USB connector, which does USB 3.2 Gen 1 and also is a display port, so you can do video through that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There's 3 Type-A USB 3.2 Gen 1 connectors, HDMI connector, and there's that RJ45 connector for the gigabit LAN. It's got a 52.4 watt hour battery and it comes with a 120 watt adapter. So according to my needs, it has that 16 gigabytes of RAM. The processor is faster than my Ryzen 5 1600, and it does have an RTX graphics card in it, GPU in it. Even though it is the lowest of the low, that was sufficient for what I needed. So this is really the cheapest gaming RTX gaming laptop that you can get. Now it cost me just about €600. That's 560 pounds. Translates to just a bit more in dollars. Of course, pricing does change per region. I bought that here in mainland Europe. So let's jump in and talk about the performance. Let's just talk about the CPU performance first of all. I ran Cinebench Release 23 using single core and multi-core, and here I've produced a graph showing you some other CPUs that kind of you might be interested in to show you the relative performance. Of course, there are so many Intel core processors, there are so many Ryzen processors that your one may not be on this list, but here we go. So we scored 1,555 in the single core. If you go back to example for the i5 9600K, then you're going to get 1,187. A Ryzen 7 3800X gives you 1,346. So you see it's better than all of those. It's better than the Apple M1. This is in single core performance. Not quite as good as the M2. And then, you know, just for a comparison of something completely different, an i9 14th generation, so the 14900K gives you a score of 2358. So you can see, obviously, this is a 12th generation, it's an i5, not an i9. So again, there's so many different processors to compare it against. But for me, comparing it against the M1 and the M2, and considering the price, I felt that was a good single core performance. In the multi-core performance, again, it does fairly well. You know, it's beating there the i5 9600K, the i7 9700K is just a tad faster. Ryzen 7 does very well, lots of cores in those devices and hyper-threading, so 13,848. But compared to the M1, faster than the M1 and faster than the M2 in terms of multi-core scoring. Then of course there's that i9, which is just in a completely different category. So again, it depends on what you're comparing it to, but again, for the price and for my needs, that was certainly an upgrade in performance to what I had before, and actually pretty good performance compared to other devices around, other laptops around. Now, of course, because it's got the RTX GPU in it, of course, it's the low-end one, but it's interesting to see how this does on games. So, for example, playing the game Control with RTX on, DLSS on, highest settings, 37 frames a second. If you turn RTX off, but you also turn DLSS off on those high settings, that drops down to 20 frames a second. Star Wars Fallen Order, that's using the Epic settings under DX11, there's 85 frames a second, so that's absolutely great. Minecraft with RTX on is 28 frames a second, Minecraft with RTX off, 95 frames a second. So I wasn't really expecting amazing performance, certainly not 4K gaming. This has got a 1080p panel on it, the laptop panel. So getting more than 30 frames a second and edging towards 60 frames a second, depending on the game, to me, is absolutely fine. I'm a casual gamer, not a hardcore gamer. I do play some games on this, and they've been good as these results show. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with that. Hardcore gamers, no, you'd want much higher. Fine, if that's what you're looking for, you need to spend more money, you need to get a better one with a better GPU and a better CPU. That's absolutely fine. But me, I wanted the cheapest that offered this ray tracing and this RTX technology. Now, talking of the display, you do have that nice 144Hz display, 1080p, as I said. I find the colors to be slightly dull in it. They're not particularly vibrant, and that can be a little bit of a trouble when I'm editing videos because the color matching can be a bit tricky. However, once I got used to that, that wasn't really an issue, but it is something to note if you are into photography or media creation. One of the good things about this laptop is it can power external monitors. So it's got that HDMI connector, so you can plug that in and you can expand your desktop with that, but it also has the DisplayPort connector via USB-C. So in fact, in my daily driver setup, I have it with 2 external monitors and the display panel, so 3 monitors in total, and that's what I use at the moment every day. That's what I use, as I said, when I was editing this video and so on. So for me, that's a big plus. Now, previous versions of the Thin GF63 didn't have that DisplayPort output through the USB-C, so you do need to make sure that the one you get has that, and you can notice that by that kind of like D with a P inside of its symbol next to the USB connector there on the side of the laptop. Now, because I do use it as my daily driver, the thing I have found most difficult is the keyboard. When I had using my desktop, of course, I chose myself a nice keyboard, and that's the advantage of a desktop. You can pick whatever keyboard you want. Now, of course, you can use an external keyboard with a laptop. At the moment, I'm using it with the built-in keyboard, and it's not brilliant. It's okay. I can type on it and I can use it. There's not much travel, and I find it sometimes hard to find all the keys when I'm kind of touch typing, and there does seem to be some movement if you press hard in the middle of the laptop there, and the keyboard, you can see that go up and down. However, for light use, it's okay. I haven't yet plugged in an external keyboard because I was so frustrated. Maybe I will, but it's just something to note. If you're doing a lot of content creation typing wise, then maybe you'll need to just be aware you might need to plug in an external keyboard to get the best from this. As I say, when you're just using it, you know, I'm off out, I've got half an hour of something to type up, then you're going to get by. But it's not a brilliant keyboard. Now, of course, the big thing is the battery life. Now we've got to remember that the RTX 2050 is a 45 watt component. So when you're running that thing at max, so you're trying to push that as high level settings, you're trying to get the best frame rate, you've got DLSS switched on, you've got RTX switched on, then that's going to use 45 watts. Now it's a 52 watt-hour battery. So it isn't hard to do the maths. If you're running the GPU at 45 watts, on top of that you've got the CPU, you've got the Wi-Fi radio, you've got the screen being powered, then you can do the maths. You're going to get an hour, basically. It's a 52 watt-hour battery, 45 watts plus other stuff, so you get 50 watts, you're going to get an hour. So if you are playing heavy gaming, not plugged in, an hour is the maximum you're going to get. However, when you're not using that RTX GPU very much, then of course you get much better battery life. In fact, these laptops, and many like them, have two GPUs. You've got the GPU that's built into the Intel chip, so that's an Intel UHD driver, and then you've got the RTX. And in fact, it uses the Intel one for the simple stuff, and that way it doesn't even power up the RTX. In fact, when I was trying to play Minecraft, because I have a version downloaded from the Microsoft Store, it actually started playing it on the Intel, and there's some settings you have to go into inside of Windows there to say, no, use the GTX one. If you're loading things through Steam or the Epic Store, then it seems to pick the RTX driver without any problem. But the point is you get better battery life. So if you're watching a YouTube video full HD over Wi-Fi, so you've got the screen going, you've got the CPU going, you've got some video decoding going, then you're going to get about 3 hours of battery life. And then if you bring that down to just productivity stuff, so for example, browsing the web or typing in documents or things like that, then you can extend that. Coding was one of the things I did a bit over the holidays. I took the laptop and did some coding on it, so just Visual Studio Code, run the compiler. You're going to get 4 to 5 hours, but you're not going to get more than that. So 4 to 5 hours is the maximum, and of course that depends on the screen brightness as well. This is all on 50% screen brightness, and what else you're using. As I said, gaming, an hour max. Stretch that out to different productivity tasks, 3, 4 or 5 hours, depending on what you're doing. And the last thing to mention is the fans. It does have active cooling, so the fans do switch on. Now, obviously, just in normal usage, bit of web browsing, bit of typing, bit of coding, the fans hardly come on at all. They seem to have several settings. When you're playing a game, they will ramp up, and they can be a bit noisy. I'd say noticeable is the best way to mention it. Now, at one point I did a firmware upgrade, and to do that it turned the fans on absolutely maximum, and that actually was quite loud. So I haven't really found the fans kind of distracting, particularly when playing games, because obviously you're involved, you're concentrating on the gameplay. For productivity stuff, it comes on kind of occasionally, just depending on what you're doing with it. There are different settings. I would say that it has got active cooling, and it can get a bit loud. That's what you need to know. Okay, so there you go. That's the kind of the roundup. So what can I say? Well, I've been using this for 2 weeks now, every single day in that 3-monitor setup, as I've said. Am I happy with my purchase? The cheapest gaming laptop I could find, faster than my previous desktop, RTX inside of it, 16 gigs of RAM. Yes, I am. I think it was a good purchase. Yes, there are better laptops out there. Yes, there are more expensive laptops out there. Yes, there are laptops with a greater performance. But for my criteria and with the budget that I had, I'm pretty pleased with my purchase. Okay, that's it. My name's Gary Sims. This is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. If you like these kind of videos, why not stick around by subscribing to the channel? Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.